Good luck. Yeah, maybe that'll work. Can you hear me okay? Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Allison. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February the 12th, 1990, and my home group is the Design for Living group in Nashville, Tennessee. We meet on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock. It's a closed discussion meeting, and the last Thursday of the month, we have an open speaker meeting. If you're ever in the Nashville area, we'd love to have you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting Diane and I here. Thanks to Stephanie for inviting us, and for District 19 and the committee for putting this on. It's a great event. We're having a really good time so far. I want to thank Tracy and Vance for being our hosts. And we talked to them before we got up here, and then we finally met in person yesterday. I want to thank the other speakers. I hadn't heard Monty before. I really enjoyed Monty's talk yesterday. I related a whole lot of what he had done in the past and how he got through it. I've heard Peter a lot of times, and he never fails to really hit home in my heart. He's such a gifted speaker, and he can explain the pain of alcoholism, what it's like, better than as well as anybody I know, and how he's recovered from it. So I really enjoyed his talk last night, and I'm really looking forward to the other speakers. Barron's this afternoon, and then Bob's going to do a workshop this afternoon, and Bob talks tonight. And then in the morning, we've got Jackie and Nancy are going to wrap this thing up. So I'm looking forward to the other speakers. I love these kind of events. And there's that other Al-Anon speaker, too, that's at 12:45. This lady down here on the front row, Nancy's pointing to. Yeah, my wife, Diane, make sure and come and hear Diane's talk at 12:45. You know, in AA, we've got the literature we got as Bill sees it, and the Al-Anons have Lois remembers. You know, there's just a big difference there. So, you know, some of mine may be hearsay, but you can come hear the truth from Diane. She was there. I just love her more than anything else. She's I call her Sparky because she's so full of energy and zest and zeal for life. I mean, she tells me her schedule every morning, and I just want to take a nap because, man, it just wears me out here. What she's going to say. But anyway, I love her to pieces. Can't wait to hear her talk. She's got a lot of recovery in Al-Anon. And one thing she told me a long time ago, she said, you know, of all the alcoholics and drug addicts I've ever dated, I like you best. You know, that's good as it gets for a guy like me. So I'm looking forward to hearing Diane. And I also want to thank Steve and Annette for recording this. And not because I'm standing up here, but I've got over time, I've really got a real respect for the people that come and record these conferences. And the reason why is because when I was new, my sponsor would just hand me cassettes, speaker talks. He'd just hand them to me. And he'd say, listen to this. You know, I don't remember asking him, do you have any cassettes I can listen to? I was like, oh, listen to this. And I had this grand central head. I mean, my brain was just on fire for a long time, but I could plug that cassette in the dash of my truck and hear another alcoholic's voice, and I just calmed down. And Tom Ivester said one time he thought that speaker meetings were the purest form of AA there is. And I've always listened to speakers. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that I got to hear when I got sober, they've all passed on now. And if they hadn't been recorded by people like Steve and Annette and other people that go to these conferences, we wouldn't have that. So, you know, you're recording our history, and if we don't support these folks, they won't do it anymore. So thank you so much for your service. I really appreciate you doing this, you know. Alcoholics Anonymous is the best thing that's ever happened to me and maybe my family. A couple of days ago, I was lucky enough to pick up a 35-year chip that it just blows me away that I've stayed here that long. And I hope you're applauding for Alcoholics Anonymous and for God, because all I did was show up here. The further I'm away from my last drink, the more I realize I didn't have anything to do with getting here. I didn't mean to get sober when I did. I wasn't thinking about it. When I got here, I didn't think I wanted it. I really didn't. And yet here I am, you know. And I realized what a blessing is. I was talking to Don last night, my friend Don, and I said, Alcoholics Anonymous has more value to me today than it ever has. It's an ongoing thing. It's not just a little piece of my life. It's my whole life. And I can never repay all the men and women that have helped me so many years. And I never want to get too many years and not enough days. This is one day at a time deal, but I've had a lot of help, so much help this time, and it's precious to me. I never want to lose this way of life. My drinking just wound up awful. I was 39 years old when I got here, and I was full of despair. I was despondent. I didn't want to live anymore. I was living one miserable day after another. I didn't think there was any way I could get better. Everything, all the people that I loved, I was mad at and pushed out of my life. It was just horrible. And I had no direction, no hope, no nothing. But it didn't start out that way. I mean, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of drinking. Both my parents drank a lot. They started a business about the time I was born, and they worked real hard every day to make this business work, and then they'd drink at night to unwind. And then, they'd drink with their friends on the weekends, and I thought, well, that's what you do. You drink and you work hard, and then you drink to relax and have fun. Every now and then somebody drink too much and overshoot the mark, and bad stuff would happen. But I thought, well, they just drank a little too much. They need to just dial it back like people couldn't control it or something. And, when I'm like 14 or 15, I go out and I get drunk, really drunk with some older boys to fit in the first time. And I overshot the mark the first night. And I remember feeling terrific and feeling a part of instead of apart from. And after that, I don't remember much. These guys took me home, and I woke up the next morning. I got violently ill and woke up the next morning with this horrible hangover. And it never once crossed my mind to not do this again. I know some people drink a lot, and they say, I'm not drinking again. Well, I thought, I'm not going to drink gin anymore. But it did something for me that it doesn't do for a non-alcoholic, and I didn't know that. I thought when I got here, everybody that drinks gets the same thing out of it that I do, and they don't. That's why they're not alcoholic. It does something special for me. It's not how much I drink or whatever it is. It's what it does for me, and it did something for me right off the bat. My wife down there on the front row is not an alcoholic, and we'll go out somewhere to a restaurant, and sometimes she'll order a drink or a glass of wine, and sometimes she won't even do that, which I don't understand. But if she gets a drink, I catch myself watching how slowly she's drinking this drink. And I'll ask her sometimes, do you want another one, or are you going to finish that? And she'll look at me and say, well, no, I don't want any more. I'm starting to feel it. And that's just sad to me. It's just sad. But it doesn't do for her what it does for me. She feels impaired. I feel empowered. That's the difference. Well, at any rate, from the time I got drunk that first time, by the way, I heard a guy last year. I forgot where we were. There was a guy talking. He said that he used to say that he drank alcoholically when he was 13. And he said after he talked, a guy came up to him and said, you don't have to say that. He said, nobody drinks socially when they're 13. So, I don't know whether I drank alcoholically young or not, but I started drinking, and I built my whole life around drinking after that. I really did. I didn't know that till I got sober, but I really did. I built my whole life around my next drink. And I barely got out of high school, and I'm a guy that has potential. I've got to, I will just put my intentions up there with anybody's. I would get dressed for the part on anything and have goals, and then I wouldn't finish any of it. But one thing I did, I worked really hard for this family business that my parents started. I worked after school and in the summer, and I did it for two reasons. Number one, to make the money that I needed to lead this lifestyle I started having. The other thing is I thought if I was a hard worker, I'd get my dad's respect. I was always seeking my dad's approval all my life, and even in my adult life, and I never did get it. I couldn't get what he couldn't give me, but I did that for two reasons. But that's the only things I did right. Other than that, I found some old report cards a while back. When you were a kid, they'd write on the back of it, they had all these boxes that they'd check where you needed to improve, and practice of self-control always hit the mark on all of them for me. And But they would write on there, I've got one that says, Michael has great potential. And I tell people, I got potential. That just means you hadn't done anything. That's what that means. But I thought that's a real big deal. So I got potential. Well, I barely get out of high school. My parents sent me off to college in Memphis to get an education to be of some value to this company that I was destined to go into, and which I did for all my working life. And it was the fall of 1968, and that's when all of a sudden the drug culture just almost overnight, it just was not there, and then it was there. And has been spoken by a couple other guys, the earlier speakers, I want you to know I'm a real alcoholic. I'm a real alcoholic, but I like all those party favors out there too, So I'm doing all that. So I basically just drug my way through college, and I meet Diane the first part of the spring of my senior year, and I just fell madly in love with her. I mean, I'm smitten with her. I'm smitten with her right now, and I always have been. I just love her to pieces. And so I drop out of college. I lack 6 hours getting a degree in business management. But I thought, well, I don't need that because I'm going back to Nashville and go to work for the family business, which I did the next day after I dropped out of school, and I stayed there 33 years until I retired from it. So I'm in Nashville, and I go to work at this job, and all of a sudden, for the first time, I'm doing something that I'm really good at. I'm hardworking and energetic and enthusiastic, and I really want to make a go of this. And all of a sudden, I become pretty successful in this business. And of course, it goes to my head. It's like I have arrived, but inside, I know there's something wrong with me. There's just inside, I got this discomfort. But, a guy like me, if I feel like I'm really rotten on the inside, if I can make you think I'm doing great, then that's what I want to do. So I'm starting buying a whole bunch of stuff and act like I'm successful and I got it all together. Well, I dated Diane for about 2 years, and I didn't have any communication skills with people at all. And I wasn't the best boyfriend in the world. I want to take my own inventory here, but Diane was managing me a little too much. I thought she don't help me to death sometimes. And so one day I just broke off the relationship with her. And I was too afraid to talk to her about it. And I didn't even tell her why. And so she goes off and just, goes on with her life. Well, I'm working hard and I'm trying to be Mr. Businessman and all this stuff. And about a year after we break up, I had to get my wisdom teeth out. And they told me I need to have somebody with me. So I got my office manager and took him to this oral surgeon. And they put an IV in my arm and they gave me some stuff. Man, they could have pulled my whole jaw out. I wouldn't have cared. But I come out of this oral surgeon's office and the guy leads me back to my apartment. And he said, is there somebody I can call until this stuff wears off? He said, you're a mess, And I'm just loaded on these drugs. And so I start writing on a piece of paper, call Diane, and I wrote her work number down. Well, this guy knew I dated Diane, but he had no idea I'd been broken up with her over a year. And he just calls her up and said, hey, Diane, this is Mike. This is George. Mike's had his wisdom teeth out. He wants you to come over and take care of him. And she's thinking, George who? Mike who? I mean, she had another guy living with her, which was a problem. But she came over on her lunch break. And I'm just loaded on these drugs, and I start writing down, I love you. I want you back. Move in with me. You know how we are. And she did. 2 days later. We've been together ever since. That was March 18th of March 18th of 1975. And every year we celebrate Tooth Day every March 18th. We're coming up on our 50th Tooth Day. Anyhow, yeah, you can applaud for Diane on that. So we get back together, and a couple months later, I'm, as Peter calls them, non-conference approved dry goods. And all of a sudden, I just look at her, and I just out of the blue, I said, let's get married. And she was shocked. And I was too. I didn't really mean to say it, but we got married, and a couple months later, we start this life together, and we found a house that we live in today, and my dad has an opportunity to leave the family business for a couple of years to fulfill this commitment he had. And so I take over this business, and I'm in my early 20s, and I'm trying to do the best I can, but it's a lot. And I did the best I could, I suppose, but I can't imagine doing that looking back now, but I did. And so we buy this house, and I'm working hard, and Diane's home, and we decided to have kids. She had 2 sons. Our sons were 8 and 11 when I got sober. They're now 43 and 46. They live in California. And so Diane's home raising kids, and I'm out there trying to be Mr. Businessman. And we got this big house, and all of a sudden my alcoholism just gets crazier. Because I got this big job, I think I'm under all this stress. So I go see my doctor, and I said, look, I got this stressful job. And I said, is there anything you can get me to help me with all this anxiety I got? So the guy gives me a prescription for some tranquilizers. So I'm taking those, and then I started having these migraine headaches that were just really painful. Now, they're really good for hangovers too, by the way, the pain medicine. But I had this crushing depression. I mean, I couldn't get out of bed some mornings. And so I go to him, and he diagnosed me with clinical depression. Now, I know there is such a thing, and there's maybe people in this room that have that. But I want you to know this is my story, and what I had was untreated alcoholism, because I didn't tell him the truth about anything, and I wasn't doing anything about my drinking. But he put me on some antidepressants because that's what he thought I had. And I was on antidepressants for 9.5 years before I got to AA, and I found out I could do without them. But I know some people can't, so I don't want to be controversial here. I'm just telling my story. So I'm taking these tranquilizers and these antidepressants and these painkillers and all the street drugs I'm taking, and washing all that down with Crown Royal and just try to power through life and be somebody. And I started to do some really crazy stuff in my mid-30s. Like I said, we bought this house we still live in. It's on a long dead-end street on a really high hill in Nashville. It's one of the highest elevations in town. And nearly all our neighbors don't have any landscaping at their houses. They just live in the woods because we've all got really good views because we're up on this high elevation. So most people don't have that. But I was in the landscaping business, and I thought I need to show off what a big shot landscaper I am. So I'm trying to grow grass in front of my house and have all these shrubs and bushes and flowers and everything to show off what a big shot landscape guy I am. But the problem was I had all these trees in my yard too that kept shading the grass out and killing it. And then all the leaves had fallen. I'd have to rake all these leaves. Well, one day I decided I'm going to cut all my trees down. And that, that'd probably been a pretty good idea, but because they were my trees, I thought. Except I wasn't really sure where my property line was on one side of me. I knew where it was at the street because our front yards are really small, and I knew where the marker was on the street, but our lot goes way down this steep hill. I mean, I've lived there since 1976. I've only been down there 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's straight up down. But I get my plat and the compass, and I wander down that hillside, and I find this old rusted out fence post in the hillside, and I convinced myself that was my property line. So then I called up a surveyor, and I said, hey, man, I can't even see my house from where I found my property line. I need you to mark this line for me. And these guys walked down this hillside with me, and they said, we don't think this is right. And I mean, instinctively, I said, no, that's my property line. I'm an alcoholic. I got this laser beam focus. I know everything. And if I'm paying you, you're going to do it my way anyway. So I'm telling these guys, yeah, that's my line. Well, these guys, in spite of them telling me that several times, which, by the way, I found out after I got sober, if you got if you need a property line found, you can just call up a surveyor and they'll come find it for you. You don't even have to tell them where you think it is. But not me. And so they marked this line, and when they got through marking this line, they had all these stakes and flags in the ground. They were almost touching my next door neighbor's house. I mean, it was from here to there with balloons, or closer than that, actually. And a sane person would have thought, well, maybe these surveyors are right. But what goes through my mind is that old goat, he's been using my land all this time. He built this house up here and moved up here before we did, and he's been using my land, and I feel violated. Now I want to cut these trees down, and I'm not going to wait till he gets home from Florida, where he and his wife went for the winter. I didn't have any communication skills, and I'm sure I'm right. I'm the tornado roaring through the lives of others. I just call up another buddy of mine with a tree surgery company, and they sent 2 of those big bucket trucks, and all these guys with chainsaws. They cut all these trees down between our houses, and it was a lot of trees. According to the jury of my peers, it was $50,000 worth of trees in 1984. Because he got home and he wasn't happy with my surveying, and he sued me. He should have, and he did. He was so upset he asked for a jury trial, which is unusual in a civil case. And I had to sit through a 2-day jury trial for cutting this man's trees down. And I remember dressing up in a 3-piece suit. I had a vest, big gold chain, pocket watch, and I go strutting in the courtroom like I'm some dignified businessman that's been falsely accused. And I'd sweated all the way through the suit. I was just a mess. I was chomping down these blue Valiums I had in the bathroom of the courthouse and during the recess to try to act calm while he's portrayed me as a lunatic for doing this. And the jury awarded him the $50,000, and they added $5,000 more punitive damages to it that he didn't even ask for. And if you're new this morning, I'm trying to describe what a resentment is, because I hate this guy. I think he's overreacted. I mean, I never took responsibility for my own actions. I never did, And this is how I was treating my next door neighbor. And I'll tell you this story because I'm going to tell you how the 9th step straightened this out. Because there's no way I could have straightened this out. This was a wonderful man. My story is about forgiveness and redemption. But I'm hating this guy. And so after he sues me, I spend the next years just hating on this man. I mean, if I saw him on our dead-end street, I'd ease my car over in his lane like I was playing chicken with him. I'd curse at him when he got his mail. I was just awful, this man. And I also said when I first got sober, I didn't hurt anybody but myself. That was such a lie. Diane and our young sons used to go visit these people. They were an older couple, and they used to go over there and visit with them while I was at work. And Diane hadn't been to Al-Anon, didn't have any recovery, and after that happened, she didn't go over there anymore. So I denied those people and my wife and my sons that relationship for a long time. Now, she'll tell you in an Al-Anon story, if I did that today, she'd maintain the relationship with people, but she didn't then. So, and I want to tell you one thing else I did. When I'm a guy, I don't like to get mad. I want to get even or get ahead. And so a couple of years before I cut his trees down and he sued me, he came to me and asked if I could get him a weeping cherry tree for his yard. He said his wife thought that was the prettiest tree there was. And I said, sure, what else you want? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, go ask her if she wants any other shrubbery. And I know he thought I was trying to sell him something, but I was just trying to act like a big shot. So he came back and he told me some other shrubs that he could use. And I asked him where he was going to plant the stuff, and he told me. So I went and got one of my crews and got the big weeping cherry tree and these other plants and planted them in his yard. And he came over to my house and he wanted to pay me. He said, look, I didn't mean for you to plant this stuff. I just hoping you'd get it for me. I mean, he just wanted to give the business to his neighbor, But like me, the big shot, like the book says, oh, you don't owe me anything. It's like, I don't need your money. I got these people. I got this business. I can just do these things. And I didn't do it for fun and for free. I didn't do that as a free gift. It was like, look at me, the big shot. So I wouldn't let him pay me. Well, a couple of years later, after I cut his other trees down and he sued me, I went over there the very next night with some herbicide and put it on the weeping cherry tree and killed it. A lot of Al-Anons in here, Diane. Alcoholics laugh and Al-Anons go, oh. I'm really glad you're here. So that's how I'm treating my next door neighbor. But in my dad comes back from this 4-year commitment he has and wants his job back. And I told him, I said, you just need to retire. I got this now. And he drank like I did. So he and I were really having this violent clash. And alcoholism it just took me to the dark side. I don't like talking about this, but it's part of our story. I started cheating on my wife. And I knew it was wrong. But that's where alcoholism took me. And I was so full of guilt, shame, and remorse on the inside because I knew I was doing the wrong thing in so many areas of my life, and I couldn't stop doing it. I was caught in that spiral of alcoholism. Well, one day I decided my dad would come out to my office every day and want to try to tell me what to do, try to help me, and I didn't want his help, and I didn't know how to talk to him, so I brought my shotgun to work, and I was going to shoot the windows and tires out of his Buick when he came to the office, and I didn't do it, but I came home that day and I told Diane what I thought about doing, and she said, for the first time, she stopped trying to fix my problem. She said, you need some help. Why don't you go see somebody? So I go to my doctor one more time. And I said, look, I don't know whether you want to put me in a nut house or what, but I was going to assassinate a Buick this morning. I know that's not a good idea. I don't know what to do. And so he set me up with a psychologist. And this was he set me up the following Monday to see this psychologist. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to slow down on my drinking. Every now and then, if Diane was on my case a lot, or I made some terrible mistake or move or embarrassing thing, I could slow down or even quit drinking. I quit drinking for 8.5 months one time on my own before I knew anything about recovery AA. This is the worst 8.5 months I've ever spent in my life. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I quit drinking, alcoholism is a lot more painful when I'm not drinking, because I got no way to put this fire out on the inside. I got this itch inside I can't scratch. So I tried that, but I thought, well, maybe I need to quit again, you know. So I don't drink that weekend, and I go see this lady on a Monday, and I thought I'm going to get to tell her what a rotten guy my dad is. My wife's on my back, and I got all these big problems. And I go in there, and she said, well, before we get started, I want to ask you a few questions. She said, how much do you drink? And I said, well, I don't drink. And she said, you don't drink at all? I said, no, ma'am. And she said, well, did you ever drink? I said, yeah, I used to. And she said, how long ago did you quit? And I said, Thursday. I said that with a straight face, because I thought if you can quit drinking, you don't have a drinking problem. And by the way, if you have a drinking problem, just stop drinking and you'll be fine. But when I stop drinking, I get crazy on the inside. And so she said, well, and I said, she said, well, before you quit drinking, how much did you drink? And to this day, I don't know. I don't know. I never ran out I had supplies of everything that I ever wanted all around me all the time. And my old buddy Tom said I used to clink in the wintertime because I'd carry these little Crown Royal miniatures in my pocket. So I don't know, but I told her as best I could how much I drank. And then she asked me something that it was just that moment of surrender. I was feeling so bad that morning. She said, do you take any drugs? And when she said that, I just crumbled. It's like, I can't do this anymore. You know, this double life I'm leading, I just can't do it anymore. I said, yeah, I take some drugs. She said, well, what kind of drugs do you take? And I told her all the stuff that I had prescriptions for, all the stuff I was getting from unlicensed pharmacists or whatever you want to call them. And she said, do you have any drugs with you now? I said, yeah. And she said, what kind of drugs do you have with you now? And I pulled out my change and I started counting these pills that were just loose in my change. And I had 37 blue Valiums, and she thought that was a lot. But I'd quit drinking on Friday, and I was a little jumpy, so I bought 100 of them from this Waffle House waitress I knew. And that's what I had on Monday. And she stopped the interview right there and said, before we go any further, I want you to have an addiction evaluation done. And I thought, wait a minute, I ain't even told you about my father yet. I got real problems, lady. I mean, I had no idea that I was in grave danger. I really didn't. So she sends me to another trained professional, and Diane and I go and see this man, and we fill out these forms. He gets us together, and he said, look, this stuff's not rocket science. This is pretty standard stuff. He said, what you've written down there, he said, you've been an alcoholic for probably 15 years. If you don't get some help pretty soon, you might die. And he said, you need to go to treatment and go to AA. I said, man, I'm too busy for that. My business is falling apart. You know, I got to go back to work because I'm really in the hole. He said, man, if you don't do something about your drinking, you're not going to have a business. You might be dead. And so I said, look, I can't go away for 30 days. He said, well, go see these people. They got a 6-week outpatient program. And so I go, he sets me up to go see this lady. Well, for the next couple of days, before I go see this lady in the treatment center, there's billboards all over Nashville advertising treatment centers, it seemed like. I saw them, just seemed like they were on every corner. And I think, well, you know, I'm not that bad. These people know I got good insurance. They're just trying to rip me off. And I'd go from, I can't stand to live in my skin another 30 seconds to, well, I'm not that bad. And that's a terrible way to go back and forth. Well, I go see the lady in the treatment center. She tells me about her program. I said, that's great what you people are doing here. But I know how to quit. I'll just quit drinking on my own. I'll come back this fall when I'm not busy and do your classes or whatever you're talking about. She looked at me like I was crazy, you know, and she said, just because you quit drinking doesn't mean you're going to quit hurting. And you see, I was thinking that if I just quit drinking and does other stuff, I'd be okay, but I wasn't. And, I didn't get a satisfactory answer to what was really wrong with me until I was almost a year sober, and my first sponsor, Buff, took me to Memphis to hear Clancy. And Clancy said two things that night that I've never forgotten. He said, the natural state of an alcoholic that just stops drinking is growing depression and anxiety. And, man, that's what I am, man. If you just take a drink away from me, I cannot stand to live in this world. And the other thing he said was the thing that makes alcoholism a fatal disease is that sobriety eventually becomes emotionally unbearable. And he wasn't talking about recovery. He was talking about quitting drinking. And I thought, man, I got to have this thing. So I signed up for this treatment center, and I had to go to 5 AA meetings a week. And I thought they meant 5 meetings. And they said, no, 5 a week. And I said, I can't do that. I'm too busy. But I'm standing up here, like I said, I got a 35-year medallion the other night. I still go to about 5 meetings a week because I got to participate in my own recovery. I'm a lot safer, and I'm so much more comfortable if I build my life around AA and not AA around my life when it's convenient. I love this way of life, and I have to have this thing. I'm a real alcoholic. So I sign up for this treatment center. I find out about the Full Moon group, which was my home group for a long time. And I pull in the parking lot, and there's cars parked everywhere. And I'm thinking, man, I've come on the wrong night. This church must be having some kind of picnic or bazaar or vacation Bible school. I mean, I thought AA was a couple of old guys in trench coats shaking and puking on each other. I didn't know what AA was. And I go in there. I'm walking across the parking lot, and there's a guy that's this singer in town. And I see him. He's the only guy that's late like me. And he comes over to me. And he said, can I help you? And I said, you're so-and-so. And he said, yeah. And I introduced myself. I said, man, I love your voice and your band. I go hear you guys at the Bluebird Cafe and wherever you play. And, He said, thanks, man. I appreciate that. But, can I help you? He asked me that like 2 or 3 times. And my mind goes to work like, this guy can't be in this A&A thing. I mean, he's a cool guy. He's still a cool guy. He must belong to this church. He's going to do a benefit for it or something, but he kept asking me. And finally, I just said, I heard there was an AA meeting here. And he said, yeah, mate, you're in the right place. And this guy opened the front door for me to my first meeting. And I found out when I'd been in there just a few minutes that this guy had 4 years of sobriety. I mean, he might as well have been Bill Wilson to me, And they seemed to know I was new. And they did a first step meeting for me, and they gave me love and service, just like Dr. Bob said. When it's all boiled down to, it's just love and service. And I didn't have anywhere else to go, y'all. I mean, I was 39 years old. I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. I really was hoping I could die, but I couldn't. Thank God. God wouldn't let me. But I thought I might not die. I might live another 39 years in this hell I'm living in. And if I tried everything I know, every substance and behavior I know to feel okay on the inside, to put this alcoholism to rest, and it all failed. I've tried it. If there was anything left out there to try, I probably would have tried it. But this was it. And my friend Cliff G from Oklahoma City said, if you make it to AA, you might as well just stay here. We don't refer you down to anywhere else. And this was the last place to go. And they went around the room, and they had a first step meeting for me, and they shared some of their stories. And one of the first guys is this great big tall guy named Joe Wall. There's some people in here remember Joe. He's about 6'6", and he said he'd had 2 DUIs in one day. Twice. And I never had a DUI. So I'm thinking, well, I'm not that bad. Another guy, Terry, that was my sponsor for over 20 years, who passed away from Alzheimer's this past year, he said that he slept with a pint of vodka every night, this old cheap vodka, and he said he'd wake up in the middle of the night shaking, and he'd reach under his pillow and grab that pint, crack the top off of it and down about half of it to stop the shakes, and put the cap back on, put it under his pillow. And a couple hours later, when his alarm go off, he'd be shaking again so bad he'd have to finish that pint off where he could shave, brush his teeth, put on a tie, and go to work as a corporate executive in a large insurance company in Nashville. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not that bad. And all these people telling their stories, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not that bad. I'm sitting there, I got nowhere else to go. I got a loaded 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol in my pocket. I mean, I'm a dangerous person. But at the end of the meeting, after I'm sitting there yes-butting everybody in there, it dawned on me that it wasn't all their jails and divorces and bankruptcies and prisons that they went through. It was how they felt on the inside, and that they found a way out of that misery. And if I just not drink today and come along, follow along, do what they do, I was going to be all right. And like I said, I didn't have a better plan, so I did. Well, I'm going to this treatment center at the same time, and when I get out, before they'd let me out, they said I had to get a sponsor. And there's this guy in the crowd named Buff. I thought he must be president of AA because everybody liked him. He said good things in meetings, and he gave me his phone number. I thought, well, I'll get Buff to be my sponsor. So I go up to him after the meeting, and when I'm not drinking, I'm scared and shy. I don't like rejection or conflict or anything. I'm just afraid of people. And I said, Buff, before I get out of treatment next week, I got to get a sponsor. And he just looked at me and he said, well, you ought to ask somebody, and walked off. And so I saw him the next week, and I said, at the next meeting, I said, Buff, will you be my sponsor? And he said, yeah, I will. He said, look, I go to a lot of meetings, and I'm going to try to be bone-crushing honest with you, and I hope you're going to be bone-crushing as honest as you can with me. And then he told me something that just, maybe it's the best words anybody's ever told me. He said, if you'll take the 12 steps with me like I took them with John Bradford, your life will change whether you want it to or not. And I've seen that over and over again. I see people not just study the steps or read them. The people that take the steps with other people that have taken the steps, their lives change. They just change. They're going to have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And with that knowledge, I'd like to tell you that that's what I did, that I just dove into the program and worked all 12 steps as fast as I could. When it was being read and how it works, at some of these I balked at all the steps. I balked at every one of them, man. When I'd feel a little better, then I'd quit until it got so painful I was either going to drink again or blow my brains out or start on the next step. So I just balked at every turn, but I stayed because I didn't have a better plan. I knew I was powerless over alcohol. My life was unmanageable. That coming to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, I was living like a savage when I came here. I thought if there was a God, I'm going to fry. And so I was afraid of God, but I reached out and because my sponsor told me to get on my knees and ask God to direct my day, and at night thank him for keeping me sober. And I did. I started praying to get my sponsor off my back, but something started happening. It started happening, and I can't describe that. But I started building a relationship with a power greater than me, and that power greater than me I call God. And so I started building this relationship with God, and honestly, there was times where I'd think, I don't believe any of this stuff. What am I doing this stuff for? This is stupid. I don't believe that. So I'd get this rebellion of against God and praying and having some kind of relationship with God. But there was a man named Mo Holleran who's been passed away a long time, and I heard him say in a meeting one time, you don't have to feel spiritual to be spiritual. It's all in action. So I kept taking the actions of trying to build this relationship with God, and slowly and surely it did. So I'm going to meetings. I got this little relationship started with God, and I've learned the lingo in meetings, and I'm just, all of a sudden I think, man, I've got this. And I was in my home group one night, and I said, I think the promises are coming true for me, and I'm only on the third step. And I said that next to this guy named Frank Donnelly, and he just looked at me, he said, you're doing the alcoholic waltz. And I said, what's that, Frank? He said, 1, 2, 3, drunk. 1, 2, 3, drunk. And I thought, you old goat, what do you know? You got sober before the Civil War, man. I've been to treatment. I know these. I'm an up-to-date alcoholic, and they just let me go. And then all of a sudden, man, I just crashed. I was reading in the book, in spite of thinking that I was following my sponsor's instructions to start on a 4-step, I wasn't really paying. I wasn't capable of. I was doing the best I could, I guess, but I wasn't listening. And I read in here where we made amends to people. We shared in a general way, and we were rigorously honest. And I thought I needed to make amends to Diane for my past behavior that she didn't know about. And without talking to my sponsor, I got her in a conversation one night and told her in a general way I'd been unfaithful to her and that I was going to be the husband and father she deserved. And it didn't go well. And by the way, if there's anybody in here this morning that's thinking about doing that, because I'm telling you, when I did that, I really thought I was doing the right thing. I had convinced myself that it was the right thing to do. And if there's anybody in here that's thinking about that, please come see me after the meeting because I want to talk to you about it. Well, I called my sponsor and told him what I did, and he went thermonuclear. And I try to keep my language clean up here because I want to be a representative of Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm going to paraphrase what he said. I won't tell you the exact words. But he said that's why they number the steps for smart college boys like you. And he said, by the way, Hoss, you didn't make amends to Diane. All you did was dump your guilt. And man, when he said that, it was like somebody stuck a knife in my chest. And I thought she'd leave me. She had every right to, but she didn't. But that's when I hit my bottom, man. That's when I said, whatever you need me to do, Buff, I got to do this. That's when I really hit another bottom. So I wrote this 4-step, I had all these resentments, all these people. I mean, I hated about everybody that I could think of, but when I wrote my resentment list down, I wrote who they were, what they did to me, and how it affected me in the first 3 columns. And I'm thinking, hey, I kind of like this. You know, I did all these things for people and they turned on me. And, you know, I always fancied myself, I was a people pleaser. I love that term. Oh, I'm such a people pleaser. Buff said, well, just, if you think you're a people pleaser, why don't you just make a list of all the people you've pleased? I said, you know, 2 or 3 names, you know. Because when I wrote in that 4th column, I wrote down how I treated those people. What were my mistakes? And what did I do to make those resentments worse? And for the first time in my life, I took responsibility for my own actions, which I had never done before. And what I wrote down hit me to the core. The people that I had the greatest resentments towards were the people that were the closest to me, that loved me the most. And I knew there was something wrong with me. So I said that prayer in there for the people I had resentments toward. I wrote down, made a fears list. I listed all my fears. It said we list them in black and white, and we ask ourselves why we had them. So I write down all these fears that I had bouncing around like a weed eater in my head all these years. And I wrote down these elaborate explanations why I had the fear. And I thought my sponsor would be so proud to know how I explained my fears. Because I thought if you can explain your fears, then you won't have them. But that's just a drunk trap. The next sentence says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? And I looked at all my reasons. I might as well just throw that in the trash can. It says we ask God to remove our fear and ask him what he would have us be. I didn't know I had that. You know, that's how I can't explain my fears away. When I've got them, they eat my soul. I got to get rid of them. I got to help God, ask God to help me get through those things. I did a sex inventory. I might as well wrote one story how I treated women and dumped all the names in it that I could remember from one night stands or the 15-year marriage I had with Diane at the time, because I didn't know how to be a partner. It wasn't that I was necessarily malicious about it. I was just selfish and self-centered. It's like, look at me, look who I'm with, and I got to spend money on you to get what I want. And I thought, man, this is not going to work, you know. I know my marriage is doomed. And Buff said, why don't you just keep taking these actions, let God sort that out. So he showed me in the book where the people that kept secrets drank again. It said invariably they got drunk, and I was afraid I was going to drink again. So I wrote down all these secrets I had to tell in a 5th step, and some of them I wrote down in code in case somebody found a piece of paper, they wouldn't know what it meant. And so I go to his house on a Saturday morning, and he said, he invited God in the room, and he said, what's the worst thing on your list? And I looked down at the code, and I told him something I thought I'd never tell another human being, and I thought he'd throw me out of his house. But instead, this man loved me enough that he told me his darkest secret that he had in his 5th step. He loved me enough to make me comfortable enough to help empty this garbage can I was carrying around on the inside. So I went through that process, and I'm almost to the end of it, and he said, well, have you left anything out? And I looked down at the code, and there was some other stuff down there that was similar to what I told him. I said, no. And he said, are you sure? And I looked at the code and I said, yeah, I'm sure. So I lied to him and said, I didn't tell him everything. So I leave his house and I'm going to go over to my office and do step 6 and 7. And I get about a block away, and all of a sudden it dawns on me that I didn't tell everything in that 5th step, and I lied to my sponsor. And it's like somebody kicks me in the chest. And it reminded me of this guy that was coming in and out and could never stay sober. And he had just done another 5th step the week before and came to our Monday night men's meeting and said that he left something out, and it bothered him so much that he got drunk again. He went to 202 and got another white chip. And for the first time, I connected the dots that if I'm a real alcoholic like he is, I got to do all this stuff. I don't get to do this stuff cafeteria style. I got to do it all or I'm a dead man, you know? And so I pick up my phone and I call Buff. I said, look, man, I left something out. And he starts laughing. And I said, why are you laughing, Buff? He said, oh, man, usually it takes a couple of hours before they call back. You're easy. He said, what is it? And I told him, he said, I love you anyway. And I've got to tell a lot of the guys that I love you anyway. We're just trying to get our lives in order here. This is a great process that we have. And by the way, I have a great life today. There's part of me that wish I never had to talk about this ugly stuff in my past, but it's just a story now. I got to remember I'm not that guy today. I could be, but I'm not that guy anymore. But sometimes I think I wish I didn't have to talk about all that stuff anymore. But you know, that stuff has value. Our dark past is our greatest asset, you know. I was listening to a guy's 5th step sometime back, and he got in my car on Saturday morning, and I invited God in the car with us. And I said, what's the worst thing on your list? And he told me, but it was real general. And so I asked him a question about it, and he answered my question. And then I just told him the worst things on my fifth step list because it doesn't have any power over me anymore. I've told a lot of guys my worst things in my fifth step. And all of a sudden he got real quiet, and I could see a shift in his eyes. And he said, I didn't tell you the truth a minute ago. Let me tell you what really happened. And so he told me that. And if I hadn't been vulnerable enough to share that with another human being, it might not have got that poison out of him. So that stuff has tremendous value. He's still sober today, which is great. So I leave Buffs after I talk to him. I go and I do steps 6 and 7. They're 2 paragraphs, became entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character and humbly ask him to remove my shortcomings. I thought 2 paragraphs, 2 steps in 5 minutes after sweating bullets for doing all these inventories and these other things. And by the way, if you're stuck on a step, it's terrible to be procrastinating on it. The times I put off doing an inventory or a fifth step or an amend, man, all it does is prolong my misery and usually the people around me too. After I take the action, I go, man, why didn't I do that sooner? Peggy Martin used to say the steps aren't punishment; they're the way to freedom. So, but I say that prayer, that 7-step prayer, but I didn't really mean it. I thought, okay, God, you take this stuff, but the next couple months, instead of making this amends list, I start thinking, well, I know how I've loused up my life. I'm just not going to be that guy anymore. Well, I wound up being the same sarcastic, explosive, depressive, anxious person I always was, except I knew why now. And that's when I found out this is not a self-help program. If I don't have a higher power to relieve me of this stuff, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. Now I got to take the action, but on my own, I can't figure it out. Well, we're down at Diane's parents' vacation home in Florida at Christmas time, and I cuss out my father-in-law and yell at my sons, and I called Buff and told him what I'd done, and he said, congratulations, Hoss, you've been trying to remove your own character defects. Why don't you get on your knees and say the 7-step prayer like you mean it, and let's get busy on these amends. So I made this amends list, and I gave it to my sponsor, which is real important to have a sponsor at this point in time, because not only is he an English-to-English interpreter, he's a guy that's an unemotional third party to my business. Like Peggy Martin used to say, as a sponsor, she said, I can shine the light for somebody in the dark, but she said, I can't shine it for me. So I wrote this list and I gave it to Buff, and he gave me some things to do. And he said, okay, and I want to tell you about 2 of them that are most important. The first one's to my wife. He wanted me to write her a letter. He was about 2 years sober at the time and showed me in the book what to write in the letter and what not to write in the letter. And I followed his directions because I didn't have a better way to do it. And I gave her the letter, and she tore it up in front of me. And I went back. I said, well, that didn't work. What do we do? He said, well, you just be the husband and father she deserves. That's what we should do. So I followed his directions, which they were better than what I tried the first time. Well, we got along fine, it seemed like, and I thought we were doing great. And about 5.5 years later, we had to go to a family counselor, and I got some information. We weren't in there 5 minutes, and my infidelity came up, and I found out what Diane wanted for an amends. And I went back to my sponsor, and he said, what do you think about that? And I said, I don't think it'll work. I think she'll leave me. And he said, well, can you stay sober if she does? And I didn't want to hear that, but I prayed about it a lot, and I realized I got to make amends to people the way they want it, not the way I want it. I don't have any right to harm other people, but I have to make amends the way they want it. And I went to her, and I told her, I said, look, I don't think this will work. I got contempt prior to investigation, by the way. And but I made the amends to her, and that was 29 years ago last December. And I've got a relationship with her today that's built on honesty and trust. It's the first time I've ever had a real partnership with another human being. I'm so grateful that she stayed as long as she did. Some people say I'm not staying for 5.5 years to fix a relationship, but I'm telling you, the guy standing up here is. I wouldn't trade my relationship with anybody's. And I love you dearly. I'm so thankful that you stayed with, and we've got to build this good life together in sobriety. Thank you so much. Now, I want to tell you about my next door neighbor. Buff told me, said, you don't go tell somebody you're sorry. They know how sorry you are. And he said, you need to go apologize to him, but you need to go plant him another weeping cherry tree. He said, now you don't need to tell him you know how I died. That won't add anything to his life. So I don't know about you, but when I find about an amend I need to make, these people just show up. And a couple of days later, I'm coming back from the back room group on a Sunday morning, and there he is out there on his riding lawnmower. And I pull at the bottom of my driveway, and my heart starts pounding. And I just stopped in the car, and I said, God, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do here. Please give me the right words to say and, show me how to do this. And I put the car in park, and I got out of my car, and I stepped around, got out of the car, walked around the 6-foot-high wood fence that I put up to try to screen him out after he sued me. And I start walking toward him, and he sees me coming, and his eyes get big as saucers because he's afraid of me. We hadn't spoken in years, and he's got this look in his eye like, can I get this lawnmower in high enough gear and outrun this guy, or should I abandon ship and run? But he turns the lawnmower off, and he gets off, and he walks over to me, and I said, Mr. Logan, can I talk to you for a minute? And he said, sure, what is it? I told him, I did a terrible thing cutting your trees down, and I've disrespected you and your wife for a long time, and all that was wrong. And I'm trying to change some things in my life, and I don't know exactly what I can do to make that right. But if there's anything I can do to repair the damage I caused you, I'm willing to do whatever it is. Now, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to say I'll do whatever you want me to do. I really didn't. I didn't mean to say that I'll do whatever you want me to do. But I asked God to direct what came out of my mouth, and that's what I blurted out. And I thought the man would just say, get off my property and don't ever come near me again, because that's how I dealt with people, man. I burned a bridge with people. And I thought everybody was like that, and I thought he would kick me out of his yard, and it'd be over with, and I could call Buff and say, okay, I made amends to this guy, and he kicked me off his property. I was sure that's what was going to happen. But instead, this man came over to me, and he put his arms around me, and he started hugging me. And he started sobbing on my shoulder. And he held me for a while, and then he pulled right back away from me and looked me right in the eyes, and he said, what's in the past is over. He forgave me right there. And it shocked me so much. I mean, I just froze. It shocked me so much. And my mind said, okay, he's forgiven you, run. I mean, I want to run away. It freaked me out so bad. Now, I want to tell you, if I hadn't had a sponsor that gave me clear instructions about making that 9th step amends, that's what I would have done. I'd have run away. But I had clear instructions from my sponsor saying, don't you run away, Michael, you got something to do here. If I had listened to my head instead of my sponsor, I'd have run away, and I would have missed what I'm going to tell you now. I'd have missed it. But I said, look, I appreciate you forgiving me, but I really want to do something to make up for this. And that's when he looked at me again. He said, you already have by coming over here. He said, the thing that hurt my wife and I the most all these years is that we'd lost our neighbor. And we've been praying every day that we'd get our neighbor back, and now our prayers have been answered. And I'd been pulling in my driveway cussing him every day, and he'd been praying for me. My sponsor told me after I'd told this story a couple of times, he said, if you ever get to where your higher power's not big enough, why don't you just borrow Mr. Logan's for a while? And I said, well, I appreciate you forgiving me, but I really want to do something to make up for it. He said, well, you already have by coming over. And I said, well, I noticed your cherry tree died over there. Can I plant you another tree? He said, well, you don't have to do that. And I said, well, I'd like to if you let me. And he said, well, Miss Logan like that. And after I got sober, my business got a lot worse for a couple of years. No offense, newcomers. But I'd made a lot of bad decisions for a long time. And I was really, at times, there was times I thought I need to slow down on my AA stuff and try to fix my financial stuff. And I just did both. And it all worked out. But it wasn't good then. And I didn't have this big fleet of trucks and a bunch of people on the payroll anymore. I was down to me and 4 guys. But my older son, who's 46 now, he didn't even remember this, but he was 12. He and I went and got a bigger weeping cherry tree and we planted it in this man's yard. And this man sent me a letter that I get to read to you. This is dated June 26, 1991. Dear Mike, it was with much surprise that we found a beautiful cherry tree in our yard when we returned home yesterday. We had not expected it so soon. We appreciate it so very much, and we will care for it, and we will cherish it always, not only for its own sake, for it is a beautiful tree, but because it symbolizes a deep and lasting friendship between us and you and your family. We pray that God will bless you and your family in all that you do, and we pray for ourselves, for we are a sinful people by nature, and there are none of us without fault. and we need his constant love and forgiveness. Again, we thank you for the tree. We're all the more grateful because you did not have to do it. Your friendship means more to us than you know. Most sincerely, George Logan. This man gave us a box of Omaha steaks every year for Christmas until he died. My dad died about a year later, and the first flowers that came to the funeral home was a wreath of purple orchids from Mr. Logan. I've still got one of them on my desk. He died about 6 years later, and you guys taught me to show up for weddings and graduations, funerals, stuff I used to think I was too busy for. But we suit up and show up, and I go to this big Baptist church in my neighborhood, and the parking lot's full. I mean, place is mobbed. He was a real prominent man. I don't know anybody in there. I don't know a soul in the whole building. But I'm going through the receiving line, and I shake hands with this one man, and he says, "Oh, you're Mr. Allison. Dad told us all about you." I'm going, "Oh, man, why did I come here?" He looked at me, and he said, "Dad said that you'd had a disagreement, but that you'd made it right." And he said, "I wouldn't have made that right if it hadn't been for my sponsor and doing the steps." The promises started coming true for me. I started knowing a new freedom, a new happiness. I got a 10th step. That I can stay current. I'm an alcoholic and a human being where I can make mistakes and correct them and move on. I got this 11th step to get to know this God that I'm still getting to know. I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, and I'm trying to carry this message to other people, and it starts going to my head. I mean, I'm in AA, Diane's an Al-Anon, our sons are an Al-Teen, we're an Al-Dog, an Al-Cat, and everything you can belong to. And then one day I get a call that from my younger son's 8th grade principal and said, "We caught your son with some marijuana in his shoe. He's out of school. We got zero tolerance for a year. Come get him right now." And I thought, you don't understand. We're the recovery family, But I pick him up, and I was angry about it. This can't be happening to us. But it made me right-sized again. And but we got him in an alternative learning center, and I had to go leave work at 1 o'clock every day to pick him up at 5 minutes to 2 and 2 o'clock every day in Nashville from this alternative learning center for a year. And either take him to our house in South Nashville or back to my sod farm in West Nashville. And I had to work extra hours for a year. And I thought, is this my reward for staying sober and sponsoring all these guys? And my kids gets kicked out of school for weed, and I got to work extra hours for a year. I'm such a knucklehead. It forced me to spend time with my son that I wouldn't have spent because I worked all the time. And I got to know him on a level that's priceless today. He'll be 43 next week. He's a lot like me. He's alcohol and drugs have really wore him out a lot of his life, and he's doing the best he can with it right now. But I can talk to him about it. We have this bond that we built that time, and I told him, I said, "Look, I want you to know I love you just the way you are. I know you're trying to do the best you can and manage this." And he hadn't drank in a while, and I said, "Look, I want you to know that if you never go to AA." You know how much I spend in AA, but I want you to know, if you never go to AA, I love you just the same. I'll never love you any less because you don't do what I do. And he said, "Well, I see what it's doing for you. So maybe that seed is planted." I've run long here. I got to wrap this thing up. I'm going to close with, well, I do want to say 2 real quick things. I know people say that and go another 30 minutes. I've been wrong about something for the last couple of years, and I just realized this a year or so ago. I always thought the grace of God entered my life when I got sober, because I still can't explain how I got sober when I did. But I've been wrong about that. The grace of God was always there. It was always there. I was just walking in the darkness, and when I ran out of whatever I ran out of, I looked up and saw the light, but the light was pulling me the whole way. And my job today is to embrace the grace and follow that light and stay out of the darkness. The other thing is I thought when I made amends, like to my wife, to my son, to my next door neighbor, and my dad, I always thought I was just trying to fix these dumpster fires in my life. But what I didn't know then that I know now is that a lot of those amends I made, some of them over 30 years ago, are still paying me dividends today. Now, that doesn't mean I live off of saying, "Look what I did 30 years ago." But I thought I was going to fix it right then and it was going to be over with. I didn't realize it was going to help me build this life I have. It's like my whole life was a whole weed patch. And when you're a weed patch, all you do is just reseed more weeds. But the steps allowed me to cut all those weeds down and plant good seed. And when those good seeds sprouted, I got good crops. And when you have good crops, that reseeds more good crops. And as long as I stay in A and do this stuff, it seems to multiply. Ian, I got to find this here somewhere. Well, I was going to read you something, but I can't find it. I just want to tell you, I love you. I love God. I love AA, and I do love this good life. Thanks for letting me be here.